So here's what I know, which isn't much, but I'll share it with you, and then we'll feel our way in the dark together. Is there is Joan Sutherland is in Robert Aiken's lineage. And her lineage, as she developed it, is a koan lineage. Our lineage is Soto Zen is not a koan lineage. We use koans as family stories, but it's not. The focus of our practice isn't koans, but they're wonderful stories that are passed down to us, wisdom and compassion and ways of being in the world. She has a book called Through Forests of Every Color, Awakening with Koans. And I'm going to, for the month of March, be relying on her because like I said, this is what she does. She practices with koans. And I think she has a lot of wisdom to share with us. And each lineage has a slightly different emphasis on which koans they pick. Well, maybe there are 3 collections of koans, maybe more than you want to know, but we'll go back to it a little bit. There is the Book of Serenity, very thick book of koans. That's Soto Zen emphasizes the koans here. The Blue Cliff Records, very thick. It's mostly koans used by the Rinzai tradition. And the Muman Khan, or the Gateless Barrier, is Robert Aiken's lineage for sure relies on this. So the koans that Joan Sutherland brings forward, I may bring forward koans that are more familiar in our tradition, because I think it will be helpful for us to know it and ground in that, but I will certainly be bringing forward her wisdom and deeply appreciating what she offers us. One of the reasons I'm doing that is because in April, I am going to be away traveling in New Zealand with my newly married Evan and Allie and my husband. And while I'm away, there is already enthusiastically lined up a group of Dharma Heart Zen practitioners who are going to be sharing koans with you, and they're going to be focusing on koans from the Hidden Lamp, which are specifically koans that focus on women. When that book came out not so many years ago, most people didn't think there were any koans that had anything to do with women. Maybe one, maybe here, maybe there. And then Sue and Florence started doing research, and lo and behold, there are many koans that just hadn't been brought forward. But I thought it would be nice and good to lay this foundation in March. And then when you leave off in April together, you'll have some ground, and maybe some, because Joan really does give techniques and practices, ways to practice with koans. One of which isn't just Joan's, but I was inspired today, and we'll get back to it, is the first koan in the Blue Cliff Record, and the second in the Book of Serenity about Bodhidharma, our first original ancestor from India. And I'll read it to you in a few minutes, but there's usually a catchphrase, a phrase that catches you, that's been passed down and passed down. And one of them in this particular koan is everything empty, nothing holy. I will confess before I turn to Joan, and the way that I often confess is I never used to like koans. I say this about most things. I do this to normalize. And koans like Bodhidharma and Emperor Wu, and I would just think, oh my goodness, what does this have to do with us? 40 years later, I think they're amazing. So maybe I can just encourage you and maybe open them a little bit for your curiosity and your practice, tenderness and care of these are our family stories. It's a lot like sitting at the Thanksgiving table and they're starting to tell the stories again. And you say, oh my goodness. But then at some point, maybe, I don't know, I'm just making this up. Maybe you think, well, Uncle Harry's told this story for 500 years, but you know what? He might not be here next Thanksgiving. And maybe I should listen because maybe there's something here that he's trying to say or convey. That if I listen between the words and listen deeply, there is something being passed here. Okay. So here's from the preface, Joan Sutherland. For a long time, I've thought of the koan tradition as a giant dragon curled at the bottom of the ocean. That's nice. That gets my attention. Every once in a while, something happens in that koan dragon's dream and she stirs, lifting a shoulder or flicking her tail, murmuring to herself. Those of us listening for dragon murmurs do our best to interpret, and the tradition evolves. So we're listening to dragons here. We can do that. Here's something attributed to Dongshuan, who's one of our ancestors. For whom do you bathe and make yourself beautiful? The voice of the cuckoo is calling you home. Hundreds of flowers fall, but her cry never ends. Still clear even in the wildest mountains. Joan Sutherland says, the epigraph above, called honoring, is from a longer Chinese poem made of koans about the journey home and then home itself. Honoring seems like a good place to begin. You enter koans through the doors of your own life, opening into the world around you. First honored is your yearning, the preparation made on faith that there is something that you will receive if you make yourself ready. What is it? An open sense of curiosity and yearning and wonder. Bathed, attended to, washed free of complications, and then aspiring to the deepest kind of beauty. Receptive, brave, dedicated, open-hearted, already you've begun to look like the things you're looking for. I really like her language as a woman's language. Often the koans, because the ancient koans before Hidden Lamp and still are usually between two men, and so they can seem really masculine. So there's a way that Joan, through her own intimate knowledge, through her own body and life, there's a way she talks about koans that I think is really beautiful. Then, and here's the most important part, you don't have to make this journey happen. You just have to learn to listen, because home is already calling you. Flowers fall, which is a way the ancients had of saying that time passes, and the call is always present. Even in the wildernesses of your life, the most confused and lost times, the call is clear if you listen for it. In Chinese legend, the cuckoo will call. In Chinese legend, the cuckoo will call until her throat bleeds and turns the azaleas red. Wow, we could stay with that image for a while. The way to honor the mystery of the world's perseverance on our half is by hearing it and responding. That's our job, our joyful job. Listening deeply to the mystery of the world and responding. Koans connect us with this larger life we sometimes lose sight of amid the concerns of our ordinary days. They make us permeable to the joys and anguish of this life, permeable to the ways we are made of and contribute to the collective dream of the world, permeable to the primordial mystery we glimpse behind the veil of the everyday. I'm going to bring forward the word permeable. Sit for a moment. The question, breathe with permeable. What is it? The purpose of realizing this mystery, as the Chinese teacher De Shun said, is to break through to grasp an ordinary person's life, to come full circle so that we might wholeheartedly ask, how can I help? Permeable so that we might wholeheartedly ask, how can I help? So now she's going to give us a little history, and I like this. I was a history major, and we did a little bit of this. Oh, we did a little bit of this with the Eightfold Path, and so for those of you who were there, you may remember this may like reinforce what we turned towards. To turn into life rather than away from it characterized the Chinese reception of the Buddhist teachings transmitted along the Silk Road from India. So if you look at a map, it was transmitted from India. Buddha was born in Lumbini and in India, and it was transmitted along the Silk Road. There are one of my most favorite art places in the whole world are the Dongshuan Caves. If the art is just, there's so many really beautiful honorings of Buddhism along the Silk Road and into China. And China, of course, is a very different culture than India. And Japan is a really different culture than China. And the West is a really different culture than China. Okay, so Silk Road from China, a process that began about 2,000 years ago and continued for centuries. We're just beginning to appreciate the importance of the time the Dharma spent on the multicultural polyglot highway of trade and artistic exchange. It seems to have prepared the way for a fruitful meeting in China of Indian philosophy with Taoism and other indigenous traditions. So we think, oh, this is just what the Buddha said, and we do need to stay true to what the Buddha said, but it's informed by the whole world. So it's the Indian aesthetic seeking the extinction of nirvana in dialogue with a Taoist sage, hoping to harmonize with the currents of the universe. So in India, it's like nirvana, get out of here. Taoist sages wanting to harmonize with the currents of the universe. And if you read Taoism, you can really feel the bridges just as you can in Theravada. And there is a particular flavor to Zen, which we come to realize through these stories. It's not better or worse, it's just there's a particular flavor. New understandings gave rise to new practices, including koan study, which emerged in Chan about 1,000 years ago. Koan introspection, as this new practice came to be called, was transmitted through East and Southeast Asia, particularly Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, and from there it has spread to many parts of the world. It's been in North America for less than 100 years. This is a living tradition. We are babies. We are always babies. But what we do and how we devote ourselves to this all the way through and seed it in our own hearts and minds and culture has everything to do with how Buddhism will live and thrive and open, not as something dead, but as living through each one of our bodies. Since every culture has welcomed the koans, has added its own, that has welcomed the koans, has added its own, it has its own distinctive style. Then is the unfinished koan. As the Zen teacher Hakuin said, I've come to trust that we, like previous generations, have something refreshing and enlarging to bring to the tradition. Our ideas of egalitarianism and inclusion and the voices that are heard when we embody these ideals the voices that are heard when we embody these ideals are landscape and poetries, the way we dream, the particular shapes our courage and kindness take, the way we are fierce, and the ways that we are tender. So please, as we do this, and next month, as you enter the hidden lamp koans, there was a time when the koans became so codified, there were books that went out with the right answer. And you just had to go in and say the right answer. And you probably had to say it in a convincing way. Norman Fisher talks about going to see Robert Aiken, and he had a little bell, and Norman would give an answer, and Robert Aiken would go, ding, wrong, and then you run out of the room. There's a particular style to this. Again, every tradition has its style. But please, this is permeable, intimate. What are these koans singing to us across the generations? It matters what arises in your heart. Trust that. Okay. I'm going to read you Emperor Wu, just to give you a flavor. I'm doing it from the Book of Serenity, case number 2. Your eyes start to cross and you start to float away. Just take a breath and come back. The case, Emperor Wu of Liang asked great teacher Bodhidharma. Okay, so let's just for a little. Emperor Wu was a pious Buddhist. He studied the scriptures, he sponsored many lectures and convocations, he gave donations to the Sangha, he built temples, and he endowed monasteries. Emperor Wu was like a big guy, you know. It's like when he called Bodhidharma to come and see him, you were coming to see the man. Bodhidharma, 6th century, was a Central Asian Buddhist monk, and he was called a barbarian. This is part of the reason I came to love Bodhidharma, because he wasn't from China, so he was a barbarian. And so we are barbarians too. And he came to China to simplify Buddhism and to cut through all the complications and to its essence. And he's usually depicted, you can, if you Google him, or maybe you already know him, or if you go to museums, he has a shaggy red beard. And after his death, he was often seen or depicted wearing one sandal, riding on a reed across the sea, going back to Central Asia. And he's just gliding along, and he's very fierce looking. I used to think, lighten up, man. Now I think, wow, he was a fierce barbarian. There's a fierce barbarian in you. And if you don't know it, I would encourage you to get to know it. Okay, so here it is. Emperor Wu asked great teacher Bodhidharma. He called him, Bodhidharma came in. What's the highest meaning of the Holy Truths? Okay, the Four Noble Truths. What's the highest meaning? You know the Four Noble Truths: suffering, cause of suffering, release of suffering, practice, the path. What's the highest meaning? Now, this is an exchange between two pretty heavy dudes, so to speak. And Bodhidharma was not impressed or bowled over by Emperor Wu. He said, everything empty, nothing holy. Or empty, there's no holy. And the emperor said, who are you facing me? And Bodhidharma said, don't know. The emperor didn't understand. Bodhidharma subsequently crossed the Yangtze River, came to Shaolin, and faced a wall for 9 years. So let me just, a moment of commentary about that. Emperor Wu was not impressed with Bodhidharma. And he said later, because he missed the moment, because he didn't get what he expected. I think this is, there's something so poignant about this. Emperor Wu later said, I saw him without seeing him. I met him without meeting him. Now, as of old, I regret and lament this. You could just as easily say that about Aunt Nancy at your dining room table on Thanksgiving. I saw her without seeing her. I met her without meeting her. You could say that about parts of yourself. You could say that about people you love, people you pass on the street. What are we missing here because we have expectations and ideas? See. Don't know mind. Don't know. Not knowing is most intimate. We know that one, right? This is an amazing koan. Okay, so here, now we're back to Joan. A student asked Ancestor Ma, another ancestor, leaving aside the four propositions, the Four Noble Truths, and letting go of the 100 negotiations, 100 million things, please point directly to why Bodhidharma came from the West. Why did he come? What was he doing when he came to China? And Ma said, this is how koans turn all of this. You want to know what Ma said? Great Master Ma. He said, today I'm worn out and can't explain it to you. Would you just go find that other guy, Zhao Hang, and ask him? So nobody's going to cooperate here. So here's a little bit of Joan's commentary on it. Gogong is the original Chinese word that is pronounced koan in Japanese. It means public case and originally referred to decisions rendered in law. It implies an understanding that is held in the collective and reliable as precedent. In other words, it's shared by a group rather than being private, and there are ancestors behind it. In other words, they must know what they're talking about. There's precedent here. Pay attention. The word Gogong also refers to the table upon which the legal document is laid, and this calls to mind the koan field, an extended sense of what a koan is. Don't just pay attention to the words. Beyond words on every page, the koan field includes the experiences of everyone who has ever taken up the koan across time of space. There's commentaries that are well known, that are in the collections that I just showed you, but we are each creating a commentary. And so we open and we listen really deeply. E.T. Suzuki said, he called them the Zen document. the one each one of us brings forth to this world at birth and tries to decipher before passing away. What is the koan? What are you doing here? What is this human life? There is no secrecy to this, as it is all open or public to us, to every one of us. If there is any hidden meaning in it at all, it is on our side and not in the document. The koan is within each of you. Chan means meditation. Zen means meditation. Zen is Chan. It's the Chinese transliteration of the Sanskrit jhana and is pronounced Zen in Japanese. Applying these words in a Western context can be tricky. Zen is popularly used as an umbrella term for all the different traditions and obscures the different characteristics. It divided into Soto and Rinzai, and I think that's not very important for us to know. Okay. Look at all of these. There's very small print. Ah, you want to see this one too? When Erica and I studied, we studied together for a year and before she received lay entrustment. Well, and Erica also comes from a koan tradition, as does Joe. There is in our tradition, there are prescribed koans that we studied together, not to figure out something that she or I should know, but to investigate together, what is this mind that each koan is pointing to? And how do we take them into our lives and make them alive? I'll read you a couple of them because you may know them. Haizhang's fox. I hated that one. I left Zen at a certain point. I thought, I'm not going to be part of a tradition that has a koan like that, where now it's like, I love it. The world honored one twirls a flower, wash your bowl. Ordinary mind is the way. Every day is a good day. No heat, no cold. Yin Yang sweeps the ground. The cypress tree. Dong Xuan is unwell. Maybe some of them ring little bells. Maybe after this investigation, some of them will stay with you. So let's see. Everything empty, nothing holy. Joan will tell us in our further investigations, is if something arises, don't censor it. Don't think that's dumb. Don't think that's not the right answer. I mean, you can do what you want, but then come back to it. Everything empty, nothing holy. What is it? What is it? Who are you? Don't know. So I'm going to put you into small groups. Each person